Hi there, welcome to the Animals Naturally podcast. In this podcast, I aim to help you get ideas on how to care for your animals naturally. Whether that's your horse, dog, cat, other pet, or other animal, there's a whole world of complementary therapies and holistic approaches that you can use to make your animal's life happier and healthier naturally. I'm Suzanne and I'm founder of Taranet, a leading international natural animal healthcare resource at taranet.co.uk. In this edition of the podcast, I'm interviewing a lady called Robyn Harries. She's not actually a relation of mine. And Robyn has a website and a business called Equenergy, which she'll talk more about. And in this episode, you'll find out more about her work with horses. It's a really fascinating interview, which I hope you find useful. Okay. So thank you, Robyn, for agreeing to speak to me today. It's really great to meet you. We've known each other virtually for a while, haven't we? But it's great to meet you finally in person.
Yes, and to put a face to the name, because obviously seeing your name in emails and posts on social media and things, and not knowing what you look like, and suddenly today to meet you is really good.
Thank you. So it'd be great to talk today a bit more about your work with horses and your business, Equenergy. So obviously you do quite a lot of different work with people as well as animals, don't you?
I do.
It'd be great to hear a bit more about your interest in horses, I suppose, really. So can you talk a bit about that?
I have always had a fascination with animals, and I grew up with a dog. She was like Nana in Peter Pan. She was my companion. And then after she died, I was just looking for people's dogs to walk. So yeah, I've always loved animals, always had animals in my life. And my mum used to ride. She had a pony when she was very young. And we used to travel to see her parents quite a lot back in the town where my mum grew up. So she still had lots of contacts and people who had horses. So anytime we would go down there, it would be blagging a ride, blagging some pony time. And then she organized riding lessons for me when I kind of was a bit bigger. I needed a little bit bigger horses, and obviously something then in the town where we lived. And I did that for lots of years and just loved that time. There's something very special and about the connection with a horse and their energy and just spending time with them. And I was quite an introverted child and didn't have all that many friends. So the animals became my friends. They became my confidants. They were the ones that I would turn to if I was feeling sad, if I was feeling lonely, or if I was feeling happy. They were the ones that I wanted to share that with. So yeah, horses then just were always a part of that experience. And anytime when Mum and I went on holiday, or I went when I moved to England and then later to Wales, it was always just, where can I find horses? Where can I find horses? And then I came across an opportunity to learn about energy healing. Did that for people first of all, but really my aim was to do it with animals. And initially I trained with Elizabeth Whiter of the Healing Animals Organization, and she was very much, you have to get a grounding. So you do the small animals first. When you've completed that, when you've graduated from that diploma, you can go on, if I deem you fit to do so, you can go on and do an equine specialism. So I did the equine, and then I went on to do equine massage, and I did a little bit of equine acupressure as well, because I'm fascinated by all of that. Mm. And I have a friend who does zoopharmacognosy, so self-selection. So she does that with horses. So I went on a couple of those days as well, because I love any plant-based. I think nature and animals offer us so much. They offer us a lot of wisdom and a lot of stuff that we can use, either whether it be plants themselves or knowledge on supporting our well-being and how to work with ourselves, with nature, with our own nature to support that. Sorry, yeah, rather long-winded answer.
It's a very good answer. It's wide-ranging. I completely get what you mean about the horses and what they offer us. If you're spending time with them and just watching them, not doing anything with them, just watching them, it's really rewarding, isn't it? Because they do all sorts of things that people probably who just don't understand or don't do anything with animals don't appreciate, do they? Sometimes overlook the little subtleties because of body language, minor things they can do, like the plants they eat as well, is it little things actually might seem nothing to us, but actually for them it's really powerful, makes their well-being so much improved, doesn't it, as well? And it makes us feel better as well, doesn't it? I think spending time.
It does. There's so much just within what you've just said, but a lot of what I've learned about well-being for people, I've learned through working with horses. It's amazing how much, like you were saying, what they eat, what they choose, and when and why and at what time, and how they work, obviously, with the seasons. So they'll eat different things at different times of the year because there are different things available, and they give different benefits which support their well-being at that time of the year. How nature and the animals work together in that, and how we can learn to do that for ourselves as well. And just the energy of a horse. They've learned about how our hearts actually have a greater electromagnetic field than our brains. And if you think of all the electro activity that's going on in the brain, that's pretty amazing. But a horse's is something like 10 times bigger. And there's a thing called entrainment, which the Heart Math Institute in America has done a lot of studies on. So if you are in the energy field of another, you will come into sync with each other. So if I become calm, I can support another person to become calm, or an animal. And horses very just out of their nature, because they are herd animals, they are prey animals. What they do is stick together and be as calm as possible for all the time that they can. Obviously, then they're ready to get into flight if they need to, but they have to conserve energy for that. So to conserve energy, they have to stay calm. And they have that herd collectiveness. And if we get into that energy, we feel it too. We get entrained by their calmness, which is so good for our well-being, because when we can get into that, so it's out of the fight or flight, out of the sympathetic nervous system into the parasympathetic, rest and repair. So our bodies can do all of that. They can digest properly. They can just do the general maintenance, and they can start to recover from injury, illness, operations, whatever it might be. And it does so much good for our emotional, cognitive well-being on top of all of that.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've picked up on something you said then. I think for people are often rushing, aren't they? Even people who have got dogs, horses, or whatever, and they're often rushing when they're trying to do things with them because their lives are so busy. But like you just said then, horses, they do have spats, for want of a better phrase, don't they? They do argue sometimes, they do not get on, they do things, but then it passes. They don't stay in that heightened state, do they, all the time? They go back to being calm, don't they? Fairly quickly, quite often.
And animals generally do. You'll see that they'll have a burst of energy, and even like if you take a dog for a walk, it'll have a burst of energy and it'll come home and it'll sleep. And they know that is the body has cycles and rhythms, and that's good. But we've lost that, and we're only supposed to be in top fight or flight for 10 to 15 minutes at a time, but we're actually living lives that we're in that state chronically now, and that's why it does harm to our bodies. It creates a toxic inner environment. And it's funny you're talking about horses having these bursts of energy, because we've had quite stormy weather here just recently, and I was up in the field yesterday evening and they were doing pirouettes. It was really quite magical watching them. And initially they were running around, and I put out some fresh dry hay for them, and it was too much excitement. But as soon as they kind of, oh, we've done that now, oh look, there's dinner, we'll just go and eat and we'll be nice and quiet. And then it was fine, and I could go and do my poo picking without having all of this craziness going on around me. So when we can learn, oh yeah, we can have these bursts of whatever, but let it go. Because emotions are energy in motion. So if we feel something, feel it, and then it can pass, rather than we try to push it down and it's not happening and I'm fine. And then it just festers away inside. When we can go, no, this is how I feel, and I'm going to express it. And animals too, they shake, and that releases it. But we have these like cultural norms. So we say, no, we don't do that anymore. But when we can listen to the animals and follow the animals, observe and see how to be, or kids, very young kids, they still know how to walk properly with good posture, how to breathe properly, right down low into their bellies. Somewhere along the line, as adults, we often lost that, disconnected from that, and disconnected from how to ground ourselves, how to center ourselves. But animals teach us all of that. And I wrote a blog about all that horses have taught me about how to look after ourselves. I think that's what animals do. They don't just teach us about, oh, what's life like as a dog, as a horse, but they teach us so much about ourselves.
So you mentioned there you've got horses. So how many horses do you have? And
Two.
Two. Yeah. So do you obviously you probably spend a great deal of time just watching and observing them and connecting with them, and must be really rewarding to have your own horses to be able to do that.
It's been, I have the geldings for 3.5 years, and the mare's been with us since we moved here, so that's 3 years. So I haven't had them all that long, and it's been quite a learning curve actually owning and being responsible for and caring for. And for me, I'd learned so much compared to when I first started with horses, and they were kept in quite a traditional way because I was going to a riding school or whatever. And then learning all about how the hoof works, how the digestive system works, the optimal, that horses aren't grazers, they're foragers, all of these different things, and reading up about founder, so laminitis, and how that comes about, and the track systems and different ways of supporting horses and why, and their evolution. So all of that, then getting a chance to put that into practice. It's been a huge learning curve, but yes, as you say, so rewarding. And although I don't ride, I just spend time with and work with horses because I like to be able to see their face, which you can't do when you're sitting on their back, unfortunately, and just to see their responses. And we kind of touched before on the body language and the facial expressions and all that you can learn from that, and the communication that you can start to develop a connection with them. So that's what I get from being around horses, really.
So you talked already about your interest in natural therapies. So can you just talk a bit more about the qualifications you have? So the what you do when you're offering your services to other people's horses?
In terms of working with horses, I do energy healing and I do equine massage, but I also look at the general kind of animal husbandry. What is a horse designed for? So I talked there about how their hooves are designed to work and their evolution, which impacts on how they move and what they eat and how they digest it and what they need and all of those sorts of things. So I look at it in a very holistic kind of way. What situation is the horse living in? Is there anything in that that we can tweak? Is there anything in that that maybe isn't as close to what a horse needs as would best benefit them? And what can we then maybe make little adaptations, because it doesn't have to be big things, just little adaptations that might make the horse feel a little bit safer and a little bit calmer and a little bit more settled and happy, because once they are, then their health improves, same as with us.
Yeah, absolutely. That doesn't need to be big things, does it? So
No.
Is there any particularly common issues you find that when you're asked to work with people's horses, any common issues or common themes you sort of tend to find?
The back is often an issue, and if you find, this is anatomy fascinates me, the idea that if you have a problem at one end, you probably have a problem at the other end as well, because we don't only have muscle pairs, so the extension and the bending in, we have muscle chains and fascia. Fascia is fascinating, how it connects right from the head down through to the tail and down to the feet. And if there's a problem in one area, it'll be reflected, because if there's tightness at the top, it pulls on the tail end as well. So just looking at the back, looking at the legs, all of these things that can help us to understand what's going on and how can we start to make those little subtle, sometimes it is very subtle changes to support the animal's well-being.
So in terms of fascia, I mean, obviously I know what that is, but for people who might not know, can you explain a bit more what that is?
Connective tissue.
Yeah.
And things like if a horse doesn't have enough to drink, or if we don't have enough to drink, the fascia will shrink slightly because it's a bit dehydrated, and it might not be enough to notice in that you look at the person or the horse, but it can still be enough to affect what's going on under the skin. And as soon as that's affected, the whole body is affected, because we are all joined up within the skin. And it has a huge impact elsewhere.
Interesting what you said about hydration then, because I'm really an advocate for people drinking more, animals having enough drink, because it's like something people's overlook, don't they? And for animals too, there's overlooked about the clean water, and they think the animals don't want water, but sometimes I find they're quite fussy, and it has to be quite clean water or out of a certain type of bucket sometimes as well. And people don't really sometimes tune in. They just think the animal's okay, doesn't want something, but actually it's because of the presentation of it isn't right, isn't it, as well? That can make a big difference, I find.
And if a horse is in a stable, that's awkward, because you have to keep going back and check that the water is there and that it's clean. Because I've known a few horses who poo in their water, and or I've heard of things like a rat being found in their water bucket, because if the stables is out in a rural location, that could easily happen. So it's making sure that they always, as you say, have access to plenty of clean, fresh water. And if you're giving a remedy, so people now are becoming more aware of things like the batch flower remedies and being able to put things in the horse's water, they also have to have clean water so that they have choice. Because they will know, the horse will know from self-selection that I mentioned earlier, is this something my body needs or is it not? And how much does my body need? And if it gets to the point of, right, that's it, I'm done, I don't need any more, it then needs another supply of water that doesn't have that in it, because it may choose not to drink that because it doesn't need the supplement, but it still needs the water.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you say, being hydrated, it makes such a huge difference to the overall well-being, doesn't it? It doesn't sound very much, does it? Actually, it's a massive difference. It's a clear mind, clear body, everything. So you talk about self-selection. You want to talk a bit more about that, and what sort of you found in your work with horses and with that?
It's not something that I use, but it's something that I'm fascinated by as well, and that I've worked with other people who use it. So I have a little bit of knowledge, but basically it's zoo pharmacognosy, so zoo animals, pharma, the content of what it is, the herb or whatever that they're looking at, the pharmacology of it, and gnosi from the Greek, of to know. So the animal, the body knows what it needs in terms of the remedy. And whether that's by scent or horses' whiskers, really, really important, because they can detect through their whiskers, is this a plant that I need or is it not? Is it a plant that is safe for me to eat or is it not? So it's not only for finding out where they are and what's around them like a cat's whiskers would be, but they can sense a lot of things through their whiskers, through their nose, through their taste. And when our body is needing something, if we taste it, it tastes good and we want more of it, until it can get to a point where then, oh no, it doesn't taste so good anymore, I don't want any more of that. And humans do it too. We have cravings. We might have cravings for chocolate, cravings for cheese, for salty food, for sour food. And it may be that I need something within that. I may not need the chocolate, though sometimes we do. Chocolate is good, but it's what is within that and what is our body needing. So pregnant women having cravings, there's something within that food they need. The same with animals. If they're eating a lot of something, it's probably because they need it. There is an exception, because with sugar and processed foods, for us, they're addictive, because sugar has the same impact on our brain as cocaine does. So it's working with somebody who really knows what they're doing to help and it gives an animal a voice is the great thing. That's what I love about self-selection. When the animal is given an array of things to choose from, you can look at what they've chosen and kind of get a sense. This is often chosen by an animal who, so maybe by an animal who's in pain or by an animal who's anxious. And as you begin to see the different things they've chosen, you get more and more of like from a 2D picture to a 3D picture, more rounded understanding of that's what my animal is struggling with right now, because that's what their body is asking for. Okay, I can start providing that for them to bring them back to the point of well-being.
Interesting what you said a few moments ago there about whiskers as well, because it's been quite a lot of people like their animals to be immaculately turned out, and of course I do like to see animals being groomed. Not so I don't, but obviously whiskers is, some people used to trim their whiskers quite a lot, didn't they, for horses, particularly animals who come some sort of competitions as well. But actually, yeah, they're vital, aren't they, for their well-being and their overall health.
So they're vital for knowing what they're eating, because they can't see when they put their head down into the bucket or whatever. Their nose is out of their field of vision. So knowing what's there beneath their nose, their muzzle, what do they got to eat? What is it, good or is it bad, or is it something they want, is it something they don't? But also just knowing their environment and being able to just get a sense and a feel of what's around them. There's the two aspects. And it if you've cut that, it's a very sensitive area. So what does it even feel like to be cut? And wind blowing against it, you think if we scratch our skin or something, it can be quite sensitive. So how must that feel for an animal? I don't know whether they've lost that sense and it feels, I'm disconnected, it feels odd, or actually this is oversensitive because you've exposed something. Mm-hmm. So either way, I think the animal really needs, they're there for a reason.
Yeah, absolutely. It's can be, for some people it's quite a controversial topic, isn't it? But as you say.
But I think we're strange as humans. We think we can improve on nature, when I think often, well, nature has taken millennia to get to this point. She knows what she's doing, because if it didn't work, she would have eliminated it. It's just kind of basic biology. So why do we try to think we can do it better?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. So are there any particularly frequently asked questions you get asked in your work with horses? And you talked about some of the common issues about being back, for instance, but are there any things people are particularly interested in, or even when you're speaking to somebody or working with their horse, that they have quite like a light bulb moment, I suppose?
I think the light bulb moments would be around how their hooves work, how they're designed to work, and around digestion, that because we think of horses as being grazers when they're actually foragers, and that a lot of the grass, the pasture land that is available for horses, if they're on livery or whatever, is really too rich for them. It's a lot of rye grass, or that grass that grows quickly because it's good, then we've got grass. And I think there's more of an understanding now about laminitis and about the sugars in the grasses, and you can get a laminitis warning app that tells you, oh, today is a day when the sugar levels are going to be high. But I think a lot of people, and it may also be a lot of people who don't have horses, and they look at a horse, say, on what looks like a bare patch of land. There's plenty of hay put out for the horse, but they think that that horse doesn't have enough to eat because there's no grass. But actually, horses don't need rich grass, and it causes a lot of problems for their digestion, for their feet. So I think there's a lot of kind of educational stuff around these animals that have been in our lives for centuries, but we have started to create ways in which we keep them that are quite different from how they would live in the wild. And it's just starting to understand that so that we can support their well-being, even though they are now under our care.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think so. Key thing you said there about just how the horses are foragers rather than grazers, and I think it's difficult, isn't it, because a lot of people want to have horses and they've not necessarily got the opportunity to have, particularly if you're going to a livery yard, you've not necessarily got the opportunity. Some are excellent livery yards, but so you don't necessarily have the opportunity, do you, to or a choice in your locality to have somewhere that's got the best type of grazing options for the horse. And it can be quite difficult, can't it, for people to then have somewhere to place a horse that they really feel is giving the horse everything they need. Is there any, do you ever suggest any kind of, if people are really restricted in terms of what they can do, where they can keep their horse, is there anything you advise to try and minimise the stress that their horse might be feeling? And
there are lots of little things that you can do, and it depends on where you are and how restricted it is. But things like, first of all, looking to what's available and asking what kind of grass have they got, looking at the hay that you buy, because the same is true for the hay. You don't want hay that's been made from high percentage ryegrass, for example. But you can do things like, if you see weeds, they're often good. dandelions, pick them and take them to your horse. If your horse doesn't have access to them in the livery or wherever they are living, then bring them along. And it's a great way of just, toss them around the floor of the stable, and then the horse is foraging for them in as much as that's possible. And so, just simple things that you can bring along: dandelions, chopped fruit, some vegetables, obviously looking into what vegetables are suitable, because some of them aren't. But and you can even make strings of vegetables that you can hang up for the horse to chew at, or bring along something for them to play with, obviously making sure that they're safe, that they're not going to choke on something or cut themselves on something. But it's just thinking maybe outside of the box, and what you can add that bring interest for the horse, that add new and different things to their diet. And taking a horse for a walk, if there's anywhere that you can take them out and about, so they're not just restricted to the fields. So whether you're riding them, walking them, there's quite a movement at the moment for just going walking with your horse. It's really good for our fitness too.
It's funny you say that. So I was out the other day near a beach, and there was somebody or two people walking a horse, and there was no saddle. They just looked like they were taking the horse for a walk. And you do see that more and more.
There's at least one Facebook group about doing that.
Yeah. So as you say, just spending the time, and it's that connection, isn't it? Being their presence and building the bond up, isn't it? Yes. Just getting to know your horse as well, and them getting to know you as well, isn't it? Giving them time to understand you, isn't it, as well? And and obviously mutual beneficial relationship then, isn't it? As you said earlier, really. So.
And then you get to build a trust as well, because the horse will get to see, oh, you make good decisions, I can trust you. Because if they don't, they're going to make their own decisions, and that might not always be in our favour. So really good to have that bond of trust where you know how they respond to things, and you know how they are in different situations, so you can work with that. And also that the horse knows you, trusts you, knows that you will take care of it, and then it can follow your lead.
I was thinking about the range of horses you've worked with, or what you've observed, really. Do you think there's any difference between older horses and younger horses and their receptiveness for the kind of work you do?
Not purely from their age. I think it will depend on their previous experience. So they say you can't teach an old dog new tricks. It's not true at all. But I think if they've had a hard life, if they've had a lot of challenges, if they have learned to not trust people, doesn't matter what age they are, that's going to be a challenge to overcome that for the horse. It may take time. You may never quite get to where they would have been had they not had the challenges. But on the other hand, it's very, very rewarding when you see that they are making shifts and changes and releasing and becoming more trusting and developing that bond with them. So I don't think it depends on age. I think it depends on the horse, their characteristics, their personality, their experiences. I think it's all of that in a mix. I think that's the way it is for us, for animals, for everything.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think you made a good point there about people think you can't teach an old dog new tricks or old horse new things, but you can, absolutely, can't you? But people can write off animals, can't they, sometimes when they're a certain age. And I think age is just a number.
It is just a number. And I actually wrote about that because I used to work on a yard, and there were two horses that belonged to the same woman, and they were stabled right next to each other. And I think there's something like 10 years difference between the two of them. But if you let them out, you'd never have known that one of them, I think, was 20 or maybe even a bit more, and the other one was a teenager. And they were just running around like loons. It was like two boys, young kids, going out and just having a rough and tumble. So absolutely, age is a number. But if they've had a hard start in life, then it can have an impact on their body and how resilient they are and how quickly they kind of age. Yeah, and obviously more time is required then, I assume, to help overcome those the things they've got in their minds from how they've been treated and the behaviour they've had to learn to cope with that. And for some, like the gelding that I have, he was taken from his mum at 1 month of age and left to starve.
God.
So because he was so young, there are lots of things that he may never learn. And he was hand reared as well. So that brought its own challenges. He has no idea of boundaries. And he has no idea that he's the size he is.
Well, why would he, I suppose, isn't it? Why would he?
Yeah. So it's like a dog. If you have a puppy and it starts out when it's really small and you keep it on your lap and you have lots of play with it, by the time it's the size of a Great Dane or something, it still thinks it's a lap dog and still tries to sit on you. And that's fine if you're happy with that, but it can be quite big.
Yeah, I wouldn't want a horse sitting on my lap either.
No, but some people,
Yeah.
when they get
Yeah,
a foal
really.
and they're hand rearing it,
Mm.
that's it feels so nice for us, and there's a lot
Yeah.
of oxytocin
Yeah.
going on there.
Yeah.
But it's remembering that they need to be a horse at the same time. They need to know their size. They need to know your vulnerability,
Mm.
so
Yeah.
that it's safe. Because
Yeah.
it's all about being safe as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. Absolutely. So I know you do lots of different work, don't you, to try and promote your services and your work with people and animals. So you've got a really helpful website, and you've developed, I see, some videos and some trailers about your work with horses as well. Do you want to talk a bit about those?
Because of what I learned around how the hoof works, the hoof is so basic to everything and often misunderstood. So I did some work with people who do trimming, and they were the ones who taught me all about that, which went on then to learn about the evolution and the digestion and the nutrition and all of those things. And taking as well what I've learned through my work with the Healing Animals Organization and Elizabeth Whiter. I thought, this was all new to me. I've known horses all my life, kind of thing. I never knew any of this. I have done other stuff when I was a kid. When I was at the riding school, they taught us about bits and bridles and saddles and riding, but I never knew any of this stuff, and it's basic. So if I don't know it, I'm sure there are a lot of other people out there who don't know it. So I thought I'll put it together into a format that people can then either, you can come and study it with me here, or you can do it online, because I'm in Wales and that's not easily accessible to everybody.
Yeah, that's really good. It's a really good idea. As you say, it's got off on the way, isn't it? People don't necessarily realise the basic things. I think sometimes people have an assumption that people know things, don't they, as well, and don't even check in that people might not know what. And people often don't want to speak up and say they don't know about something, do they? So yeah, having an opportunity to to tap into your knowledge and the information you can provide is
and if you're like me and you've just known horses as something that you ride and you learn how to ride and you learn how to interact on that kind of a level, to then start thinking, oh, I'll get a horse of my own. It's quite a shock to what that is, and looking after them and being responsible for feeding them and making sure that they have as much of what they need in their life as you possibly can manage. So I thought, for people like that, because I've known lots of people who just, I think I'll get a horse, and then, oh gosh, how do I look after this big animal?
Yeah, absolutely. Particularly, as you say, if you're on a livery yard, there's some level of support. Even if you're DIY, you have some level of support, won't you? But if you've got your horse at your own home, or you've got a field next to your house or whatever, or near your house, then it's a whole nother learning curve, isn't it? Quite daunting.
Well, yeah, and also for people who are on a livery yard, because they may have some an understanding of a horse in a different level to other people on the yard, because there's some people who are quite traditional, and then there are others who maybe have a different way of looking at things, and they're wanting to look after their horse in one way, but they're maybe coming up against traditional views, and to be able to say, no, your way's fine, your way is good. Maybe you want to have some more ways that you can explain that, so language that you can use, and also to be comfortable with meeting with professionals such as the trimmer, the farrier, the vet, to know what to say and to know how to tell them something, because sometimes our own language is a bit, we don't feel it's appropriate in front of a professional. So things that we might talk about, digestion or whatever, it's not the medical terms, or the parts of the body, they're not the medical terms, and then the vet might give us all this medical stuff and we're a bit bamboozled. So it was to help people with that as well, to start to get a sense of your horse's body and what goes on within that, so that you're comfortable and confident to speak to the vet and to take on board what they say as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to talk about the vets because I think there's a presumption, isn't there, that a lot of vets aren't interested in natural therapies or holistic approaches. And I think it does obviously depend on what vets you go to, what vet you have. But I mean, in my experience, there's a lot of vets are really interested because they do see the animal as a whole. A lot of them do,
Yeah.
and I think if vets are really close to that and you're struggling as an owner with that, then actually you need to find another vet, because you shouldn't just take what you're being told or what you're hearing as being sort of the gospel kind of thing. And not to say you shouldn't, not about not being dismissive. And some people might be pressured into thinking that they're wrong by trying to challenge or dismiss what that vet's saying, but it's just, if it's not right for your horse, then you need to be confident in that, don't you? And actually there are other vets a lot of vets are open to different therapies, aren't they? Different ways of working.
And that's another point, that it is your horse. You are the one who knows your animal. You know a certain amount, if not all, of their history. You know what they're like in certain situations. And you can then stand up for your horse and speak for your horse. Because a vet might, they might never have met the horse before. They don't know what are they normally like. So how do they behave? What do they like to eat? What are they like in situations? Are they an anxious, nervous horse, or are they a strong, confident horse? They're not going to know unless you're there to tell them. So you don't have to accept what the vet says. You can say, well, actually, for my horse, it's XYZ. So there's that kind of confidence as well. Absolutely. And yes, feel free to get a second opinion or to look for another vet. But yes, most equine vets, I think, and I find, have their own horses. So they are, I think, quite an open group of people. They understand that horses are complex beings and that they have many different characteristics and likes and preferences and all of this stuff. So I think now as well, with the younger vets coming up, they're more aware of all of the complementary ways of looking at things as well.
Yeah, and I think I think I do get quite passionate about the idea that people think if something's not evidence based then it doesn't work. But I think actually what is evidence, isn't it? Is evidence being having a research paper done. And often some of these research articles on research studies aren't necessarily independent as people might think. Often they're sponsored some way by some company with an agenda, aren't they, as well? So as you said before, really, nature has been around for millennia, isn't it? And actually, if stuff doesn't work, then it just doesn't continue, does it? And actually, a lot of complementary therapies have been used for years, like self-selection, like you say. I mean, horses and people who've been working with horses. I mean, it's only in the last, well, with less than 100 years, isn't it, that we had all these different feed companies and different feeds you could buy animals. I mean, there just wasn't there, was it? Animals had a much were more in tune with nature and their own as well, weren't they? So now this push for things got to be evidence-based. It's actually not always obviously you don't want to be doing things that are wrong. I don't think anyone will ever want that, but it's actually a lot of things aren't wrong just because they're not evidenced in the research paper, are they?
And that's another point, because things like homeopathy, there is evidence if you choose to accept it as evidence. And it's what is chosen to be, that is acceptable evidence, and what is not, like you're saying, whether it's sponsored or it's just, no, we don't accept that, because homeopathy is alternative. It doesn't have to be, it can be complementary. So I can get quite passionate about that use of word. But you mentioned also horse feeds. That's another thing to really look at. Read the menu, read the list of ingredients, and see, are there things in there that you don't know what they are? Because a horse, and I went to a conference years ago and there was a horse feed person as one of the exhibitors, and they said our feed, and I can't remember unfortunately which company it was, but our feed is the only feed at that time anyway that's registered as, I think, vegan or vegetarian. You think, but a horse is, so why, what else is going in there? And it's like we've become so used to fast food and processed food for ourselves, so well, we just do the same for our animals, don't we? But if you read, and if you have a laminitic, a horse that's prone to laminitis, or a pony, you read the labels and you'll be surprised how much sugar and molasses and stuff you'll find in all of these processed feeds. So it's doing due diligence and research and trying to find the ones that are as natural as possible, that don't contain pesticides, because if they have a shelf life, quite often they'll have anti-mold, mold inhibitors and pesticides and stuff in them to prolong that shelf life. But it's not good for the inside of a horse, particularly over a long period of time. And some horses get away with it, and some are much more sensitive. So I know that they may be a little bit more expensive, but then perhaps you'll have a healthier horse and fewer vet bills. If it's that balance as well.
Yeah. People would think, we don't want to spend X amount of money, but actually, if you're stopping those extra farrier bills for trying to help sort of laminitis out, or vets bills and stuff, then it's all spending money to save money in the long run, isn't it? And yeah, absolutely.
And it's like for ourselves, if you don't have time for the little niggles now, you're going to have to make time for your illness later. And if you don't look after yourself and feed yourself well, you're not going to have because we are what we eat, you're not going to have as strong and as resilient a body and an immune system as you might otherwise have had.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's been a fascinating discussion. Is it, before we wrap up, do you want to tell people about your website address and the different opportunities people have to contact you?
Absolutely. So my website address, I better spell it out for you. It's Equenergy, EQUENERGY.com. And that's the fusion of equilibrium, so balance, and energy, because when we can get our energies back into balance, we experience well-being much more in a much more natural way. So Equenergy.com. And on there is a contact form. So I think it's the second tab across at the top, contact and location. And when you click on that, there's a contact form, there's my WhatsApp, my email address, and also there's my calendar. So you can book a Zoom call with me to just have a chat.
Good stuff. So I'll put that in the...
I also have a links list, so you can find me on social media and so on.
Excellent. So great opportunities for people to contact you to learn more. So yeah, I'll put that in the links to the notes page of the episode as well. But yeah, it's great. So it's been wonderful to meet you, and thank you very much.
Great to chat with you too, Suzanne, at last. It's lovely to meet you. Thank you.
Bye. It's an interesting episode of the Animals Naturally podcast. I'll post in the notes Robyn's website address and also my Taranet Complementary Therapies website address. And also recently, Robyn did a post for my natural pet health blog, which I'm sure you'll also find interesting, and I shall post that in the notes too. Thank you for listening, and until next time, goodbye.